Welcome to the podcast. I'm Zach. This is my buddy Will, and we're going to discuss today some basics in being prepared. Yeah, that's Boy Scout motto related stuff. One of the things that has genuinely affected me a lot with Boy Scouts was when I was a young lad, this was the book that I used. There's a bunch of different versions of it right now. There's like all these ones right here that you could see. But yeah, I love the survivalist side of it. I love the morals that it teaches. That was really cool to look back and see how valuable that was.
So, I mean, I'm kind of like you. I did kind of grow up and do Boy Scouts. I started in Cub Scouts. I've got my library kind of right back here for the corner. I still have those books there because I fully expect at some point, if we did have an extended situation where things were rough for a while I wish everybody had studied and knew how to tie some good knots and do some things, I will probably have people around me that need to start at that level of Cub Scouts, and that's okay. If they're willing to learn, we can go from there. I will say that, like, growing up when we did the scout camps every summer, I think 3 years in a row I took the Wilderness Survival Merit Badge, just because I liked building the fort out of sticks and pine straw and things like that, just so I could do it again. Probably wasted some time on that, but it was fun.
So diving into this, though, we're going to go over health checks, group expeditions, research, planning, and contingency plans.
So we've got a little graphic here, and I think this is a good way to look at how we need to approach survival, emergency preparedness, prepping, any of this stuff. The very foundation to everything has to be, do I have a will to survive? Like, if your whole thing is, hey, I've got all this food storage, but I think it tastes nasty, and gosh, I hope I never have to eat it, like, you're failing on foundation right there. If you're worried about, like, hey, if the bomb's dropping, I'm just going to run towards the light, this is not the podcast for you. You got to have a will, you got to have a desire to get started. Then you add your knowledge to that. So what can I learn, whether that's watching podcasts like this, reading books, just all the information that we have out there and available to us. Whatever you're drawn to, I would say start there. And then we've got to take that knowledge and put it into training and practice.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I'm playing with radios right now, and I'm learning a whole bunch of things. And sometimes it goes really well, and sometimes it's a learning opportunity. And I've had more learning opportunities lately than I have. Things went great the first time. But then at the very pinnacle, I love gear. Everybody loves gear. Gear's fun. It's cool to hang it. You want the cool gear. But really, if you don't have any of this other stuff below it, are you really going to know what to do with the gear when the time comes? So I want to start with that and just kind of lay that foundation. I think we probably need to revisit this periodically.
Yeah, I think this is really smart because you can imagine how many people have literally flipped this upside down, where they're like, hey, I got cool gear because it makes me feel this way. I always think about, like, people that start going to the gym and they're like, well, I want to feel like I fit in. So they buy clothing that, looks like gym clothing, or they're a runner now. You're like, I'm going to get into whatever it is. And they get the stuff,
Right.
and then they using it literally. That's like this upside down, and then they're like, well, now that I have used it and practiced it, now let me try to learn more about it. And so they flipped it upside down on its head. And fundamentally, though, like you said, like, without that desire and intention from the ground up to survive, all this sort of, it's backwards, right? It could collapse on
I
itself.
would say another version I see this periodically is people start with the desire, they realize there's something they need to do, and then they throw gear down on level 2.
Right.
And so the trick, though, is sometimes and I've done it, I'm guilty of this personally. I bought gear only to find out there's something better over there that if I would have actually put some knowledge and learned about it first and maybe practiced with it some, I would have gone there first, and now I'm spending twice the money.
When you're beginning, like, a journey, right? You're going out there and you're beginning. Do you think to yourself, oh, here's some stuff I need to take with me on any given journey? Or do you think to yourself, like, okay, if I'm going to go on a journey, I need to have all the intel about that, what it's going to be, what I'm going to need
Yeah.
there. and then you plan accordingly. You don't have like just a bag. That's how I'm thinking of it, right?
Right,
I mean,
right,
yeah, some people try to make their bug out bag, right? Something that could, you could face everything with, right? It's
right.
like you're not just bugging out. They're trying to turn themselves into this like one man headquarters, right? Where they can live out of it forever, right? Like you got your like your seeds in there, everything that you can plant, and it's
Only weighs 190 pounds. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, that's it, right? So yeah, barring, those that are in training to pass some special forces course, right? The Q course, um, you don't need to have that much stuff. And so I think starting with some intention um, from the top, when you're beginning to be prepared, like what am I preparing for? Is the question we should be asking ourselves.
Right, right. And I think there are some cases where there's going to be some standard things across the board. Having a small first aid kit is probably always good to have on hand. Um, your everyday carry stuff, as long as you can't take a pocket knife on an airplane, unfortunately. But I mean, there's some things like that that you know you're going to go to every day. Those probably always qualify. But then I think beyond that, like I think you're alluding to, maybe what's more specific to the needs of what you're doing at the moment here.
And needs like there's the gear, there's your immediate shelter, which I consider like your clothing, what's on
Mhm.
your back, right? And something that someone recently talked about was footwear, actually.
Mhm.
It's like how easy is it to be completely disabled if you're wearing the wrong footwear? I
Yeah.
mean, just ask yourself any given scenario. If you if you're not prepared, and I mean, we're talking about closed toe, right?
Hmm.
And having something that can be laced up, right? If it's sandals, if you're wearing flip-flops out there, if you're wearing your Crocs, man, like
Which probably at least every other morning I probably get up and walk the dog with Crocs on. So I'm just as guilty, but like
it
I'm
is,
only
and
going 3 or 4 houses away, so it's usually not that bad. But if something did happen, I got Crocs.
yeah,
That's what I got to
exactly.
work with now.
They're on a road trip and they're just trying to be comfortable, even before a journey begins, like just in general preparedness, like if you're at your bed and something happens in your house, right? If there's, I mean, something as simple as what if there was a storm, Will? There's a storm, the
Oh,
window breaks, and you got glass on the floor. Do you have a pair of shoes
mhm.
nearby, right? I
Can I
think
give
about
you a
some,
real world example of that?
yeah, please.
So in 1988, in North Carolina, we had a series of tornadoes come through here, and didn't know the gentleman at the time, but I met him later. He was a neighbor of mine, and he went to bed that night in his boxers and woke up to find the top of his house gone and half of the side of his house missing. And with that, his closet was gone. So for the first half an hour, here's this guy walking around with no shoes and boxers.
Oh,
Now the neighbors helped him out. They, found some shoes that would fit him, put some pants on him, threw a t-shirt at him type thing. But after that, he's like, I always sleep with a set of shorts and a t-shirt next to the bed and a pair of shoes that I can throw on. And I was like,
yeah,
why wouldn't you do that?
yeah, yeah.
Once you've heard a story like that, that makes perfect sense. So I've adopted that.
I think about that. I also think about like, I mean, everyone's got their own thing that they really can't survive without. I probably could go without wearing my glasses or contacts.
Hmm.
Wear contacts for the most part and got all my peripheral vision. But at night, it's just so much easier to sleep without, even though I could
Yeah.
sleep with my particular contacts. But I have my glasses nearby,
Mhm.
right? And something I recently realized that I should have is an extra pair of glasses, and not just an extra pair of glasses, but like a sports style pair of glasses, something that's going to stay on my face
Mm.
regardless of the activity that I'm doing. And so I got and it's not like a pair of goggles,
Right.
but it's like a nice sporty style pair of glasses that fits around. Like they function very similarly to the shape and contour of your eye pro when you're going to the shooting range, right?
Gotcha.
They're sealed around the sides and that sort of thing. But yeah, there's a lot to pay attention to when you
Mhm.
want to be prepared because depending on how physically fit you are and everything,
So
that might
let's
change.
let's come to that then. Let's talk about number one prep, ourselves, our bodies.
Totally.
If we're packing for this proverbial trip and we're trying to get our bag pulled together, what are some health concerns that we want to look at? What are some things to take note of as you're getting ready for that?
In fact, walking, being
Mm.
good at walking. This is something I've heard on a regular basis. Coming from my wife, who was certified as a physical trainer, and it's very possible that some there could be some sort of traffic jam. If there were to be, heaven forbid, an EMP strike,
Right.
or there'd be a run on fuel and you'd have to get really far away and you were out of fuel for whatever reason it is, right? You end up on your foot in a lot of scenarios. And so the ability to just walk in a varied terrain, I think would be huge.
Like if you're going on a mission trip over to Africa, I would say maybe make sure you can take care of the preventative stuff ahead of time. I don't know that this always applies, but it's probably a good rule in life. Like if I need to get a crown taken care of and have my dentist do something like that, I probably want to do it now before I'm stuck in the car and the EMP's gone off.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I think sometimes that's another way to look at some of those things is just what can we do ahead of time to make sure that we're in optimal shape. Like I don't mind sharing this with you and everybody who's watching. Like I know I've got a few pounds on me that I don't need right now, and so I'm trying to put a program together for what can I do to minimize that. So if I've got to walk, I don't have to carry as much.
I started hitting the gym more this year than I have. And it's not just because New Year's resolution and that sort of thing. I've just been trying to really make it back there. I've had some really good successes, and have been working primarily on some strength building. But I realize, what would be so useful is to get your legs and your feet used to walking on trails, on places that have the ups and downs and the
The uneven
debris.
ground, yeah,
Yeah, uneven ground, really. And I think about this all has to do with, just being prepared for something, not procrastinating. The opposite of preparation may you might be able to say is procrastination, right? You're avoiding the thing you should do. That could be another way to put that. But I think about how often people do procrastinate things. Like you said, like is it the crown? Is it the starter on your car that's not quite
hmm
working yet, but you're getting away with it? Is it, there's all these things that preppers know they could be doing. And so in an emergency, you don't want to have to look back and think, oh, I knew this. You don't want to have these
yeah.
regrets of like, I knew I should have been doing that. That would be probably one of the worst feelings right there.
Well,
And
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 that said,
again,
we know life is busy. Everybody's got things going on, and you got to prioritize stuff. If we could all
yeah.
just set our life down and we're independently wealthy, maybe we could focus on this all day long. But to your point, I think it's a matter of trying to prioritize and get through that list as quickly as we can because we all know more's going to get added to it.
Being prepared mentally, having like some physical resilience,
hmm
all the stuff that you could do. I talk about uneven ground. Like this is a very frequent thing that at my martial arts school, it's like the moment you accidentally step off the mat and there's that like 2 inch fall off into the hard floor, right? And you're like, uh-oh, well, let me get back up on the mat so that we're fighting on this. No, no, no. Like you gotta like if your shoe slips off your foot or whatever it is
Right.
happening, right? You gotta just react with it and be okay with it. And I think that's the resilience part of it. But again, like because it's not just you on your own, the kind of support that is required for survival. This is just a historical thing, right? This is back when we had tribes. I could talk about community all day long because it's such a big thing in my values. My core values
hmm
has to do with having a tribe around you and a network. But yeah, as if you were going to do this, you're going to go somewhere. It's probably going to be with other people. You're
hmm
probably not going to be solo, like last man standing.
I'm not leaving my family behind.
Yeah, you're not going to leave, the most important people in your life behind. How you can help prepare as a group.
Right. There are a lot of different ways to approach that. I'm thinking specifically of my family. I've got a father who's in his mid 70s now, and he's slowing down a bit in life. Um, I think he's still got a lot of life in him, but I noticed that when we went on family vacation, that was one of those things we had to take into account, was
Yeah.
just making sure he had enough time to do the things he needed to at the pace he needed to do it at.
Yeah.
And on the other end of that, I've got a toddler in my house. And
Yeah.
so if we need to go somewhere, if we needed to move in a hurry, how do we make sure that her needs are taken care of and something. So some of that I think is maybe you can put plans together for how do you want to divide and conquer some of those scenarios, who's going to be in charge of what. I'm sure like if I were dividing up a road things for a road trip with my family and I'm going to drive and one of the kids is going to be navigator and mom's going to be in charge of the baby and whoever's on snack detail probably has the best job ever. And I just we can figure all that stuff out. What does that look like ahead of time? and I think some of it's also just being honest with yourself. Like, can you really accomplish those goals? Do you have everything that you need? Um, and is it enough? Sometimes you have to figure out this is what I've got, and we're going to work with it from there.
Getting people all on board with the same thing, I just immediately am thinking about like who's carrying what. You
Yeah,
know, you mentioned like the snack bag or whatever. Like someone's going to have the medical needs. Someone's going to have very specific needs. Like what if it was like, I have a sibling that had asthma and there
yeah,
were like medicines that had to go with, right? I mean, I have my contacts and my glasses. I'm like that just in small ways, and there's some bigger ways, right? You have to consider a lot of different things. But I think it's important to empower people to be responsible for themselves, even within your own home. Obviously, you as the leader, or whether, and I'm not saying you as the man. I've heard of a lot of people in the prepper network that I'm on here locally that there's a lot of women who are interested in it
absolutely.
and not their husbands actually, and so they're trying to get their husbands on board, and so it's not always just the patriarch of the
Well, I
family.
think it's whoever the call to preparedness speaks to is probably a good way
Yeah.
to put it, because sometimes some of us are more drawn to it than others.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is
So,
something you can't do just because you have to. There have been a lot of, I mean, take for example, in the church that you and I go to, there's been a lot of calls for the membership to just try to get together all that they need to
mhm,
survive 72 hours a month, maybe a year of some long-term food
mhm,
storage. If they can, do your best at it, but um, this is a difficult thing to do if you're not hooked on it,
right.
and I think there's some things in recent time, as we're aware of, for me it was the pandemic that got me turned around. So
Mhm,
I'm, in the grand scheme of things, I'm fairly new at it, but that doesn't mean I haven't always had an interest in um the survival aspect, the self-defense aspect, the things
right.
that could help you get through hard times and hard circumstances. And so, but you had a different background with that.
I
You had
did.
started much earlier. If you want to briefly mention that, we can turn this into a story time for another video.
I would say that I think in my adult life, I actually began. I was a young kid, still working myself through college, but I'd found a job at a mainframe software company. And mostly our clients are Fortune 1000. Nobody else is using mainframes anymore, but Y2K rolled around. And so suddenly I'm looking at my client list and I'm seeing, oh, wait, who's upgraded their financial software and who hasn't? And, so again, these are large companies. Some of them just threw an army of people at it and got it done in a month. And
Yeah.
other people just, dedicated two resources and they were pounding away on the thing for a year and a half. Obviously, we got there. Okay, we're still here. The world's still going on. But it gave me enough moment to pause and say, hey, maybe I don't think this is it. This is the big event. But what if this was an event of sorts and it started things cascading? What do I need to do to be ready for some of that so that I'm taken care of and my family's prepared? And so that was kind of my start. And so that's really when I think I got into it as an adult.
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah.
like you, I grew up and you want to do the rough and tumble stuff and want to learn how to, do a flying roundhouse kick or something. And that was cool. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And what we probably should do is take a deep look into that experience that people had back then, how that
Mhm.
changed society in certain ways, how that got people thinking along these lines. And then same thing with the pandemic, how that affected society as well. But I digress. That's
We can even throw 2012 in there too with the Mayan calendar. That got some
oh,
people
for
going too.
sure.
So anyway,
For sure. Yeah.
another video.
All right. Well, and moving on to some other topics here,
Yeah.
we want to discuss research, right?
Okay.
Uh, there's obviously this just has to do with knowing where you might end up going,
Mhm.
or having a plan in the first place. Something that I would love to just get squared away for everybody in my circles is to have a family plan. Yeah, everyone's talking about like let's get a MAG together, a mutual assistance group where we can have our network of preppers to help each other out as soon as things goes down. We got our GMRS radios and we got our our FRS radios for little teams, and then we have our all of our ham radios for the long distance stuff to keep in touch with people like on the other side of the world and stuff. I think in the home it's the model of society. It's not just like foundational stuff. Everyone likes the term, and the in our in our circles, everyone likes the term to say family is like the core unit of society. But family is where you get to practice everything that might happen in society, right? This is where
Right.
you are clearly going to run into offending each other, clearly going to have an opportunity to forgive each other. You're going to improve, ethically, morally, and in every way. And it's here where you begin to share things that your children take out into the world that I mean, there's like one of our leaders in our church has said, like, there's no, you can't make up for a failure in the home because of that being so fundamental and important.
Yeah.
To
No success anywhere else is going to compensate for that.
You've got your empowered group of people in your house that's like, okay, you're in charge of your bag. What's going to work for you? What's going to work for you? And we could talk about bags and gear at another time, but in that situation, do you know where you're going to go with it? Do you know what you would do if you were separated? Is there a place, an emergency contact list that
Mhm.
you're equipped with? Just having some sort of plan to look at, like, hey, in a likely event that's upcoming, right? We got hurricane season that happens here in the southeast. We have droughts that happen out west where there's literal like
Or
fires
floods
just
out west right now.
between how like there's always a chance of blizzards up where I'm from in
Mhm.
the Northeast. A family plan will be the core of your survival, right? Knowing where you're going to rendezvous if you guys needed to in a certain disaster scenario.
When you were growing up, did your family have the fire drills? Do you guys ever do fire drills? Like, if there's a fire in the house, this is where we meet.
Yeah, I think I remember something like that.
I,
Yeah,
I
there's
did. Every house we moved to, that was like one of the first, like in the first 3 weeks, I knew that was coming.
yeah,
And we had like my parents were diligent about that, and I hated it at the time, and I look back on it with fondness now.
yeah.
But you knew like, hey, this is the street corner. Like, I remember growing up, we always had a password, and so if somebody's going to come pick us up from school, they had that wasn't mom or dad. They had to know the password.
When I was a kid, and I saw there's some images stuck in my head of how dangerous gasoline vapor was, right? There's all these warnings
Interesting.
about gasoline, right? And there's this one image of the vapor having a face on it and just like looking evil, right? And I think about, in a scenario where I want to train my son to respond if there is an emergency. And
Hmm.
there are some times where, I left him down in the living room where I had to go run out somewhere and my wife was upstairs or whatever it was. I was going to take a shower while he was down in the living room. It's like, if you hear someone banging on the door, what do you do? And where's your first hiding place on the first floor? Where's your hiding place on the second floor?
Hmm.
And if you had a phone with you, I gave him my phone. It's like, can you call someone? Can you access the emergency number
Hmm.
and dial in? What would you say? Do you know our address? For kids, there's a whole topic right there.
Right. But I kind of like what you're laying out there because those are kind of like, hey, here's the normal thing. Here's what we've got planned. You know, in your son's life, it's probably going to be, hey, while dad's upstairs, I'm just going to sit here and snack and watch TV. And, I don't want, 999 out of 1,000 times, that's how it's going to go, and it's going to be just fine. But here you are talking them through like, hey, so what are the contingencies if it doesn't play out that way?
Right.
And
Right.
and those are good things to think about. I had an experience like that. My boys are older now, but they were old enough when Hurricane Katrina hit, and they saw it on the news, and they kind of got really worried about that. They were nervous about what would happen if that happened here, and they knew we had hurricanes, and so I had this great little moment with them, really, where we kind of sat down and talked about it, and we put like a little, almost kind of like a get home bag together in a Ziploc bag that had like, here's a first aid kit, and here's a flashlight, and and I went and bought some of the old GMRS, the little 2 watt things that aren't nearly as powerful as some of the new ones that are out now. But I bought a set of those, and we put them all in the bag. And then I made sure to go ahead and talk to the teachers about it and say, hey, this is what happened. He feels better having this in his bag right now. It's probably not going to be there forever. But if something does happen and you see this in the bag, please feel free to use any of it. But the thing that we talked about was, hey, here's the deal. Dad works outside the house. I'm going to come get you. And so we'd always do how many people are in the family. And they knew that was the frequency to be on. And I said, okay, so every 10 minutes, I'm going to say, hey, can you hear me? And I said, and for a while, you're not going to hear anything because I'm not going to be close enough. But at some
Right.
point, you'll hear me and I'll be close enough and you'll know that I'm right around the corner. And that was enough to just kind of give them peace of mind. Hey, we've got a plan. If there's a bad storm and dad's not with me or we're not at home or whatever's going on, I've got some things that'll kind of help me get through this.
You're thinking, what are the basic things that they need to know? You
Mhm.
know, and then that reminds you of what your priorities are. Like you said, if we have our priorities straight, it'll make the world a difference, right? If
Right,
we run out and grab an expensive ham radio or whatever, and they don't know how to use it, they're not licensed. Like there's clearly a disconnect when it comes to that gear first and survival instincts and knowledge later, right?
right.
But yeah, when I think about some of the things that we could do, obviously knowing your scenario,
Hmm.
researching what you're about to do. And this I will say, I thought about multiple times. One, I was going out to Indianapolis, to do some work out there, and I picked out uh, two people to join me, that could be a part of my crew, for the project. And I hadn't worked with them before in this capacity, traveling that far north during a cold season made me realize I didn't wear enough of the right stuff, and it was a very sobering experience. It's fun, like you just think like, man, things are good in life. I get to travel for work and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And while I was up there driving to the airport, I was like, I'm so dependent on my GPS when I'm out of town.
Ah,
I'm so dependent on that. And I I mean, I know GPS will still work if the cell phone line is down, depending on the map they're using. Google Maps, I remember we used that when we were in Eastern Europe, my wife and I on a trip there back in 2014. And we realized, oh, we didn't have SIM cards in our phone, but the satellite was still showing us on the map where we were. And so it
nice.
helped to have those maps downloaded already.
Uh-huh.
And that's something everybody can do in their
Right.
situation, right? In fact, there's something like this is the location of where you are, right? When you look at the Compass app on
Uh-huh.
here. And I'm not going to show anybody exactly where I am right now, but I will say that there's some tools that will work, but in my situation, I had it plugged in because it was on 5% battery and I was trying to get to my location. Or I didn't have it plugged in or whatever it was. And I was like, oh man, like, am I going to memorize all these turns to get to this Airbnb?
Right.
Right? Am I going to know what to do? Fortunately, I've never had a situation like that come down on me when I'm out there traveling or anything like that. And the kind of people that I go travel with, they're really, really smart guys, definitely survivalists. In fact, these two guys I found out when I was out there, are completely different walks of life. One was from South America, the other, definitely lived a very alternative life, a bit older than me, really big, strong dude. And I loved it. The moment we got to the Airbnb at night,
Uh-huh.
we are all three of us were assessing the situation, like what kind of neighborhood we're in. And I got this picture of my my big buddy Dave, who he goes into the Airbnb, and I immediately see him go to the kitchen, and he pulls out the biggest knife he could possibly pull out of the drawer. And I'm like, what are you doing there? And so he goes, and I'm like, Dave, what's up, man? And he's like, back door's unlocked. And so he's clearing the room for us, right? And so he goes
I
out
love it.
into the garage back there, and and we look at every single nook and cranny of the house. Um, and it's important to, like, again, this is similar to like your research, right? The
Hmm.
environment, how cold is it going to be? Like when I went up to my northeast hometown, and I took my little boy, I was like, am I prepared to walk home if my car breaks down? If the
Mm.
event happens here, can I get to one place or the other? What would that be like? Am I taking a route that would be easy to follow if I didn't have electronics here? And an easy thing to do for everybody. This is actually something you can do. You can get maps for free for all 50 states. But
Hmm.
something that I've done, I put in each car, is when I'm traveling the typical routes going to our family, I have picked up at the tourist uh, stop, the
Hmm.
pit stop when you're at the welcome center, and you get free maps of that state. So I have multiple maps going up and down in the direction that we normally travel for
Right.
the holidays. But in addition to that, that kind of preparation to have a plan, like what would you do in that situation? Is there someone you would call? I mean, minimally, if you get separated, like I mentioned to my wife, when we were overseas the one time, like if we did get separated, we didn't have phones at the time. This is a while ago, before it was like really easy to get SIM cards in your phones, back then. But we're over there and we thought to ourselves, what would we do? And the easy answer is, there's an online way to communicate with each other, to drop off a message. And simply put, if you were to get on, say Facebook Messenger on
Hmm.
Signal, you find a place to log in, and then you can say, "Hey, I'm here, but I can't stay here, or I will stay here," and
Right.
say where you're going to go if you can't stay there, right? And have a rendezvous plan, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
I think this stuff is super important, to know that like we're gonna go after each other as soon as something happens. I'm gonna pick up the kid from school. We're gonna pick up the wife from work or wherever she is, that sort of thing.
Right.
Um, I'm gonna find my way home, those sort of things. And we have a plan there. So anyway, I'm over talking it, but
No, no. I was gonna say,
that's
why are you talking about travel? I had some thoughts pop into my head, just kind of common sense stuff for my travels. Um, One is like when I'm traveling, especially internationally, I always try and make a note, usually in my phone or on a pad of paper, if there's an embassy or a consulate nearby, and nearby being a relative term, kind of in the general location, have that written down just in case you need it. Hopefully, I've never had to use it once.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that's always good to know. If there's public transportation in the area, if you can kind of get a feel for how often it runs, is it every 15 minutes? Is it every hour? That may be
Yeah.
something worth knowing. Because
Mhm.
again, those are good resources if we're not in a total grid down scenario.
Yeah.
Those are good people that are going to be able to help you find where you need to go. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
the
Similarly with the embassy, you can write down the phone number as well.
Right.
That's something that I did when I was overseas when right before Ukraine was invaded, and
Mm.
I was in a neighboring country, working with the embassy to create a campaign project that would lessen the amount of Russian propaganda on their televisions over there.
Interesting.
And so one of the things that you wanted to be aware of was, where can you go?
Hmm.
Who would you call, right? And how would you ask for that, right? Thankfully, a lot of places in the world right now, people will speak English. Places in
Yes.
Eastern Europe that are former Soviet Union countries, I speak enough Russian that I can get along with someone there, right? I can figure out some. If you know numbers, if you know how to refer to a couple of different points of like, well, number one, you need a bathroom, right? Like say, and don't translate it directly. Use the actual word, right? Toilet. I need a toilet, not a bathroom, right? um, but there's definitely some places around the world where it'd be useful. Like I know a guy actually. He's a former special forces who has a company who provides this pretty amazing service where basically it's a red button app. You pull up your phone and you hit the red button right dead center,
Okay.
and services will come to your location wherever you are in whatever country you're. Well, I mean, I'm sure there's some countries they don't have this, but in like a civilized country, right?
Any
You're gonna,
country they're operating in, yeah.
yeah, when you're operating there, you
Wow.
can have pop over and help you out if you're in a sticky situation. Someone will call you, that sort of thing.
So my last trip to Hong Kong, and I think I would say the overarching principle here is if you're going to travel and you can work some flexibility in it, be adaptable, be flexible. I was over in Hong Kong and we were going to go look at some things in downtown Hong Kong around the city center. And as we were getting off the boat there at the harbor, there was a big protest in front of the government building. And this was about 4 years after Hong Kong had
Mm.
reunited with mainland China. So the protest was along the lines of the people wanted more liberty in choosing who their elected officials were and who were going to represent them, and they didn't feel like they were getting it. That was the summary I got from my then mother-in-law. So
Yeah.
we're walking around. We're heading. We kind of walk past it, and we're heading over. And there were some big office buildings nearby. One of them was a bank. And as we're walking in that direction, I see a big 2.5 ton olive drab truck pull up. And I can see the driver's side, and the driver steps out and not just kind of dressed in fatigues. I didn't see what was going on the other side, but eventually the other door opened, and the person walked around, and they had a sniper rifle with the biggest scope I've ever seen on it. And they walked into the bank building, and that overlooked the city center. And I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew that even if nothing happened, I wanted to be about anywhere else in the city than there right at that point. And so, so we decided we would save looking at the things downtown for another day, and we promptly found a way to get somewhere out east there, and we were easily an hour away from that. I never did
So,
see anything happen on the news. I'm assuming the best, but you just never know. So I would
right.
say be adaptable, be flexible. You're going to need to roll with things sometimes, in spite of the best contingency plans.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, those are the scenarios that you want to, I mean, not every single scenario, but like there's some basic scenarios. You just look at like the typical kinds of disasters that happen, right? Active shooter is one of them, right? That's one,
Right.
unfortunately, in our day and age, like in most every country, you have to be able to think to yourself, in the situation, if that happened, what do I do? You don't want to have to be making that decision in the middle of it. What you were doing there was engaging in high quality situational awareness. And
Right.
situational awareness is something that it's a skill to be honed. I don't think it takes a whole lot of effort for someone like me who this is just like kind of ingrained in me, like the spy world, fieldcraft, that sort of stuff has just always been top of mind interest, that sort of thing. No, I have not worked in that field, but this is, I mean, some people take to it a lot easier than others do. And I happen to be someone that, since a very young age, I've always thought, how could I escape here? Who's doing what? Who could I take? That
You
who
really
could
got
take.
into the James Bond movies when you were a kid, didn't you?
Absolutely. You take, for example, like I mean, even small things to look at ways to see around, right?
Huh?
I remember in this is a silly one, but I remember in the movie it was the movie that the show 24 with Kiefer Sutherland was based
Okay.
on. And it had Brad Pitt and Robert Redford. Help me out. What's the name of this movie? Spy Games.
Oh yes, yes.
Okay. So there's this part in there where Robert Redford's doing some training with Brad Pitt, and he points out the reflection. I think it was on the coffee
Okay.
container,
Uh-huh. Yep.
and he's saying like he's keeping an eye on who's coming in and out the door because of that reflection right there. And I thought, well, it was like very passing comment, but it was cool enough to stick in my memory. And I remember I was in McDonald's one time as a kid, like just a young kid, and I remember like one of my family members was kind of messing with me, young teenage man, like. And they were like, "Hey, there's a cute girl that just walked in here," and I was like, "I know, I'm watching the reflection in the. I'm
Already
aware."
applying the tradecraft.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so it's funny. Like as a civilian, I think a lot of people think like we have no business learning any of these skills. Like, and there's some special forces dude, some CIA people, FBI people that think, yeah, this is our thing, like and probably because of the fact that some people that have tried to execute certain judgments a little too fast in self-defense and that sort of thing have found themselves in trouble in the past
Sure.
when they've done something where they haven't trained in it, haven't trained in it appropriately. But these skills are still available to learn some basic things, and there's some like fun games that you can even teach your family. Have you heard of Kim's game before?
No. Tell me about Kim's game.
Check this out. And everyone has a junk drawer at home. This is
Yes.
fun. I don't know the origin of this game, but I've heard about this. It's a great thing to learn some skills to be able to be aware of what's in a room when you walk into it. Okay,
Okay.
but take a handful of stuff from a junk drawer and you put it on a table on a mat, something very clear. You could see all these things, like nine different things in front of your kid, or I mean, you do it with yourself, right? And you don't know what's in there yourself, right? And they don't know, and you give them a limited period of time, say 10 seconds, look at everything on this table or on this
Hmm.
mat, this like these nine items or whatever it is, and then you take it away and you got all of them, right? And they have to tell you what all those things were, right? So it's this like memory game, like how quickly can you assess what's in there? You can go from walking into a room that you've never seen before, walking out of it and knowing all the things you could use in there,
Right.
knowing what all the threats are in there, right? All that
Or
sort
what
of
all
thing.
the resources and assets are in
All the
there.
resources, everything,
Yeah.
right? And just some situational awareness, practicing that sort of skill. It's pretty fun. It's called Kim's Game.
We play games
Situation.
every night with the family on Sunday nights, so maybe I'll try that one next.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna do that with my 7-year-old now.
Nice.
So I like that. I like everything that you pointed out there. Is there anything that we missed in the whole topic of being prepared for a survival emergency crisis
Um,
situation.
I mean, I think the overarching principle to being prepared a lot of times is just using common sense. I remember reading one of my survival handbooks, and they were talking about just survival in the world, which I thought was interesting because I was, like, how are we gonna, take a rubber band and a paper clip and build a skyscraper and MacGyver something there. That's what I thought I was going to be getting out of this book. And they said, like, when you're out and about in the world, you use common sense. If you're walking home at night and there's a bunch of drunk frat boys walking towards you, you don't have to walk through the frat boys. Why don't you cross the street and just let it not be a thing?
Yeah, let
Um,
it be a thing. Yeah.
yeah, and so I think a lot of being prepared is also just looking at the world around you, that situational awareness. If there's an idiot driver driving crazy, maybe just let him pass, and you don't have to worry about an accident and
Yeah.
everything that's going to entail. Um,
Yeah.
just things like that in life, I think, are a good way
Yeah.
to approach
Yeah,
things.
that's smart. That's smart. And something along the same lines I would say highly encourage is try to reconnect to your natural instinct
Hmm.
to recognize danger and flee from danger, right? And this is a fundamental thing in the martial art that I study. It's considered by those who believe in the lineage, right, to be the oldest martial art in practice right now. It's got the old samurai, the old ninja arts in it. It's nine schools all wrapped up into one. It's the original mixed martial art called Bujinkan. Now it's something that it's hard to get really good at because they do it the right way in Japan, and we're all everywhere else in the world we're just trying it, right? And so there's a lot of other martial arts that you benefit from practicing. You and I have gone to BJJ together,
Yep,
try that out and that sort of thing. Um, but that martial art has a really phenomenal philosophy, and one of those key points is that even running away is winning because surviving is winning.
I agree.
And so I think about escape from that perspective, fleeing the fight or flight.
Hmm.
Flight doesn't mean bad, right?
Yeah, it means
Fight,
live to see tomorrow.
right.
Yeah,
Fight may get you in a situation where you aren't living
yeah,
until tomorrow. But in this situation that we're now describing, like what you talked about when you were overseas, like yeah, if you see something going on, or if you're in a place where dark alleyway, I've been down a few dark alleyways in my life for a lot of reasons. Overseas, here at home, hometown, different socioeconomic levels of
right,
society, and you want to be able to hear and listen to what I would call the still small voice, but I think
hmm,
everyone has a gut instinct, and a lot of people have been shutting that out. A lot of people have been uh, feeling like we don't live in a society like that. We can get away with, always being appropriate and not screaming if there's a problem, not reacting if someone's walking up to us very fast. That's something that I've had to work out of my system
right,
as I grew up. If there's someone approaching you, and this is something taught in my martial art a lot. Like the moment someone's going towards you, you should be dropping into your defensive stance, right? Your kame. And one of those things uh, doesn't have to look like you're ready to punch somebody, right?
right,
It's just simple. It's just as simple as there's a hand up front and a hand behind. So you're like, hey there. Or even something like this. You're discussing something. One hand ahead of you, so you're guarding here. You're ready to go into that motion, right? And so to put yourself in a slightly more prepared position so that your
right.
hands aren't just down by your side and you're not just waiting for someone to walk up to you. Or if you feel someone walking up to you from the side, fast out of your peripheral, whatever it is, and you just don't react because in society we don't have to react. We don't have
Well,
to
you want
overreact.
to assume the best so nobody's offended.
Right. And
Yeah,
that is not
not always
the
the case.
reality. That's not the reality of it.
Yeah,
And so I think society has trained a lot of those instincts out of us. But what you're talking about, like it's a skill with situational awareness, and it's also listening to the innate powers that are in you,
right.
right? It's the instincts, the things that our ancestors gave us. It's the thing, you feel like a lot of people feel like they connect to the universe in a certain way or to divinity, have a warning system in place. I absolutely have found that to be the case. Absolutely.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, that's
So,
pretty rare. Well, why don't we wrap it up right now?
should we
And
do our card of the week?
I think we should.
So,
Let's go ahead.
this
So,
is our.
The deck that we're using is WROL, A World Without Rule of Law.
Yep. So I've got the
And
card this week here. So I'm going to
let's
read
do
this
it.
to you, and I'll let you answer first here.
What's the
Let's
topic?
let's see here if I can get this up here.
A little bit in focus here.
Almost.
Pull back, pull back.
There
Oh,
we
yeah, yeah.
go.
Economic collapse. All right.
Yes. All right. So in 1994, the Mexican peso crisis led to widespread economic turmoil in the country. You're a customs officer at the U.S.-Mexico border, and you notice a significant increase in smuggling as people try to make ends meet. One day you catch a close friend attempting to smuggle goods across the border. Here's your question. Do you report your friend and have them face legal consequences, or do you let them go, potentially compromising your own integrity and career?
Hmm. This is great. So what we're gonna do is take turns, right? You ask the
Right.
question, I'll
So
answer
yeah, you get to
first.
go first on this one.
All right. So integrity. Let's talk about that. What is integrity, right? Where it's a value. And values, as I've been recently studying in sophrology, meditation, and that sort of thing, you're basing your decisions on, you're basing your beliefs on, and your action on, your behavior, right? So
Mhm.
so it's this Venn diagram where all those things make up your value. And if you have integrity under certain circumstances, you what you don't want to do is lose your values. If you're under duress, if you're in a crisis, you don't want to lose those values. And so keeping those or regaining those, depending on your situation, right,
Right.
is something that does take some work and focus. And so when I think about that, no, in my opinion, you don't want to compromise your integrity. And what you want to do is make sure that as things are falling apart, um, I mean, if I had to just choose between those two, I unfortunately, I'd probably be the person that would say, hey, if you don't, I'm going to have to report you. And so I would try to turn it into a dialogue at first, but I probably just wouldn't let it slide all the way.
Interesting.
Now, that's my opinion to start with. But I'm sure, like given the circumstances, being put in a situation like that, I can't imagine that it would be an easy decision to make, and especially being faced with the tears, the pain, the struggle of societies in those situations, and especially close friends. That would be a tough decision to make. But yeah, I in general, and I'm just going to claim this out loud again, with the caveat that I don't know how I'd really react when it came down to it. But I would try to keep them on the straight and narrow and not go down that path because that takes a lot of things down that way, right? It takes you and society along with it. And so once you start
Okay.
letting something get justified, I'm afraid that will lead to other things getting justified, even if it's someone else. And it could lead into your life as well. So anyway, those are my initial thoughts. What are you thinking?
I like your approach to that. That's not the angle I approached this from when I was thinking about the question. Um, One of the things that stood out to me was close friend. So this isn't a casual acquaintance. This isn't the guy that lives, around the corner from you that maybe you like, maybe you don't. Um, I was looking at that initially. So I think my first thing would be is what's being smuggled. If we're talking something illicit and illegal, then yeah, like that's got to cut that one off. But what if he's smuggling canned peaches,
Right.
or something like that? Well,
All
now
right.
I'm looking
Yes.
at this going, okay, well, I don't want, like what he's doing is dangerous. He needs to know that there are people watching out for this, and that he could be jeopardizing his situation here. But I'm also kind of looking at it as I've got a guy who kind of knows the ins and outs of the border crossing and some of the black or gray market now, and maybe that's not the worst thing to have in my back pocket if things keep going south.
I
Um,
love
so
it.
so yeah, I'm looking at this from a couple of angles. I think for me the deciding thing in my head was, is it illegal and illicit? Is it going to hurt somebody, or are we just trying to make ends meet and help out with things and get things better?
Yeah.
I'm kind of like you though. I think until I was in that exact situation, I don't know exactly how that would play out.
Yeah, I like all the different angles that you're looking at it from, and I think one of the greatest benefits of having a game like this, there's some other games that, cards like in this, you have your emergency preparedness basics, natural and man-made disasters, the run of the bank, those sort of things. If you aren't questioning this, if you haven't let
Mhm.
these questions come and go in your life, and you haven't even considered them, when it comes down to it, it's going to make it so much harder. When I
Yeah.
have a conversation with you about it, you know, our mag group, our family, those sort of things, just having had that conversation once will help us be a little bit more prepared to make the decision when the time comes. At least at a level-headed position right now, or so we think, we're trying to make a good decision, right?
Well,
In that circumstance, obviously, there's going to be all these other, you know, oh, disclaimer this and, you know, caveat to that.
right now we've got the benefit of taking the emotion out of the equation.
It's true. Yes. Yeah.
And so I think that's the advantage of thinking ahead, because when you're in the scenario and you're really there, boots on the ground, yeah, there's a lot more going on. It's different than when it is just talking about it right now casually. So good things to think about.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you, Will. It's been great talking to you today.
Yeah,
And
you too, Zach.
everybody out here, I'd like you to subscribe, like, share, comment. Let's talk about what you would do if you're in this situation. And as far as being prepared goes, is there anything that you feel like we missed? Because there's obviously a lot of different thoughts out there, a lot of different books that you can pull resources from. And one of those books that we have enjoyed and we've been pulling some from that you could follow along as we're studying the same resource is this really popular one. This I have the pocket-sized version of it. SAS Survival Guide, Ultimate Guide to Surviving Anywhere. Really, really useful. And they have bigger ones for those who don't like to read microscopically with microscopes. But I'll tell you what, you comment below. We'll see what you think, and we might even respond to that in the next couple of videos here. So thanks for watching, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Detonate, got the moment to strike, I don't hesitate. I'm feeling like winning, they spitting the venom, but I got the power, I ain't afraid.